And so to start off, and we find this story in 1 Kings 18, and beginning in let's start in verse 20. So we're going to read, and then I'll comment as we go along here. So it says, So Ahab sent to all the people of Israel and gathered the prophets together on Mount Carmel. And Elijah came near all the people and said, How long will you go limping between two different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal, then follow him. And the people did not answer him a word. Then Elijah said to the people, even I only, am left a prophet of the Lord. But Baal's prophets are 450. So Elijah's like, I'm the only one left here. Everyone's either hiding or they're dead from Jezebel. You all got 450. So let 2 bulls be given to us, and let them choose 1 bull for themselves, cut into pieces, lay it on the wood, but put no fire to it. And I will prepare the other bull and lay it on the wood and put no fire to it. And you will call upon the name of your God, and I will call upon the name of the Lord. And the God who answers by fire, he is the real God. That's the setup here. And all the people answered, It is well spoken. Then Elijah said to all the prophets of Baal, Choose for yourselves 1 bull, prepare it first, for you are many, and call upon the name of your God, but put no fire to it. So he lets them go first. And they took the bull that was given them, and they prepared it, and called upon the name of Baal from morning until noon, saying, this is their prayer, right? O Baal, answer us. But there was no voice, and no one answered. And they limped around the altar that they had made. So here's the first part of this confrontation. So Elijah lets them go first. These prophets of Baal, 450 of them. Now we have to understand here that Baal, Asherah, and there's a whole bunch of other gods that the nations worship. These weren't fictitious, fake gods that they just made up. We have to understand that in the supernatural worldview of the Bible, that these were actual fallen angels, fallen entities that rebelled against God. And so they weren't these, fake, just statues, these idols that these people just randomly worshipped and, hoped something would happen. Like these gods, small g gods, are actual fallen entities in the unseen realm. And when you look across all the different civilizations and nations, a lot of these entities are the same being, just by different names. And so we have to understand that they were real. There are real demonic entities in the kingdom of darkness that these people worship. And so let's just think about that for a second. So you have Queen Jezebel, who was raised in a home where she was basically dedicated to these fallen entities, to these demonic entities. And so where I argue that where she was literally possessed by demonic spirits. And so when they're involved in a lot of these rituals and ceremonies and practices, like stuff happen. Like there is actual power in the kingdom of darkness. Like things actually happen. So the occult, witchcraft, sorcery, demonic ceremonies and rituals where blood sacrifice is happening, like this stuff actually attracts demonic power, demonic influence. It's not fake. And so it says that these 400 prophets of Baal, who again were instilled by Jezebel, this possessed demonic queen of the northern kingdom, it says that they called out, "O Baal, answer us," but there was no voice, and they limped around the altar. So that word limped there this speaks of dancing. And so from morning until noon, they were dancing around the altar. So much so that they began to limp because they became so tired. But you have to understand, so like this whole setting, this whole scene where you have these 2 altars being set up, and you cut up the bull, you lay it on the altar, and then they start dancing around the altar. This is an actual ritualistic ceremony that they would conduct. This wasn't the first time they have done this. And they're going around and they're doing their chants and they're doing their special dances, and this stuff actually has power in the kingdom of darkness. When you start diving into witchcraft and sorcery and enchantments and all this stuff in the Bible, I'm not talking about modern day stuff, that's a whole other subject, but in the Bible, like, these people actually had power in the kingdom of darkness. Like, stuff would happen. So this whole scenario, they didn't join this confrontation. They didn't just, show up one day thinking that, oh, we serve a fake God, so let's go after Elijah, the prophet of Yahweh, into some confrontation, knowing that the God that we serve is fake and not real. Like, that's not what they would do. They wouldn't walk into a fight knowing that they're going to lose. They're engaging in ceremonial, ritualistic activities in the worship of a false deity, a demonic entity that they would have already been done who knows how many times, and who knows how many demonic experiences that they would have encountered. And so their first part of what they were doing is they were dancing around, chanting, doing whatever ceremonial activities that they did. That's what they were doing because it's worked before. This whole idea of getting fire to fall and to consume this altar was something that they would have experienced. And if not specifically that, other events that would have led them to believe that their God, Baal, is the real God. And this is what we have to really understand. They weren't just wishfully thinking, oh, let's just do these random chants and dance around our altar looking like idiots to a fake God that doesn't even exist. Like, that's not what was going on. And if you do a deep dive study into the worship of Baal and these practices and these ceremonies and stuff that they did, I mean, the stuff is demonic and it's intense and there's actual power there. But from morning until noon, that part, the dancing, the enchantments, their calling out, was yielding no result. So this would have been shocking to them. They would have been like, hey, what's going on here? And then we see at noon, Elijah starts mocking them, saying, cry aloud, for he is a god. Either he is musing himself or he's relieving himself. He's mocking these 450 prophets of Baal, saying, hey, maybe your God's going to the bathroom. Now, for him to have that kind of attitude, I mean, he would have to know, Elijah would have had to know that God is doing something here. Because he's living in that worldview. He would have understood that there's stuff going on in the unseen realm, that there is a kingdom of darkness. But he's mocking them as he's watching them for hours doing their ceremonies and their enchantments and all this stuff. And so this is not just a simple jab. I mean, this mock was like, man, like these prophets of Baal would have been freaking out, like, what is going on? And now he's mocking our God. And then it says in verse 28, and then they cried aloud, and they began to cut themselves after their custom with swords and lances until the blood gushed out upon them. So then they kind of take things to the next level, and they start cutting themselves until blood was gushing out over them. And like this is satanic ritualistic practice 101. The cutting of skin and blood gushing out, blood sacrifice. Like what we don't understand here in the Western world is the idea of blood sacrifice when that's done and what that does in attracting the kingdom of darkness, the unseen realm. Like, stuff happens in an environment, in people, in surroundings when there's blood sacrifice done to fallen entities. to fallen demonic entities. This wasn't just some, again, random thing that they decided to do because they were all out of options. Let's just cut ourselves. Like when you research just that act in and of itself, all throughout history, even up till today, the act of cutting yourself, blood gushing out, the role that blood has in ceremonies and rituals is so far beyond the modern Western perspective. It does something in the unseen realm. It unlocks things. It opens things up to where the unseen realm can interact with our world. This is why they do these things. When you study satanic rituals and ceremonies, it's always involving blood. Sacrificing of animals, sacrificing of people. Whenever blood is being spilt and shed, and along with certain enchantments and sayings and prayers and all this kind of stuff, it literally unlocks things in the supernatural. It's not just random exercise. Stuff happens. It attracts the powers of darkness. It creates openings for them to come into our terrestrial space and influence humanity. This is why they do those things, because in the unseen realm, the way God has orchestrated things and structured things, demonic entities and beings in the unseen realm can't just do whatever they want. There's still structure and policy and format that has to take place. They can't just interact with us on a whim and do whatever they want. There's rules in place that allow them to cross bounds and to come into our space. And this kind of stuff, certain enchantments and ceremonies and rituals with blood and all this stuff, is part of the way that gives them access into our realm. And so this is what these people were doing. This wasn't random. And so they're calling out to their god, Baal, and they're dancing around and they're doing their stuff for hours. Nothing's happening. Then they start cutting themselves. Blood's being gushed. Blood's being spilled. They're continuously dancing around now because this is the stuff that they would have done before that's attracted results. Except this time, nothing is happening. Like, the level of evil and satanic activity here is huge. These were 450 prophets of this false god. They weren't just random people. They were prophets. This was their job. This is what they did. This is what they devoted their lives to, giving themselves over. I mean, it's very possible that each one of these guys were literally possessed as well. And so when you put all of that together, and so for hours, they're calling out to their God, they're doing their ceremonies, they're doing their rituals, they're cutting themselves, blood is being spilt, and yet nothing happens. Nothing happens. To me, this highlights and signifies and just shows the level of power that God has. Because there's all throughout history, I mean, these fallen beings have influenced nations. These fallen entities have created systems and certain civilizations and all that stuff where they influence people and they get access to come into our world through, these various means. But on this particular day, God said no. Like, he shuts it down. No matter what they did, no matter what they tried, nothing worked. And unfortunately, like on a typical Sunday morning, if a pastor's preaching on this, that whole part doesn't ever really get fully specified and unpacked. It's always, well, they cried out to Baal and nothing happened. They're just an idol, and basically God said no. Like they don't unpack the fact that typically stuff would have happened. Typically, the kingdom of darkness has power, and when they're given access through various ceremonies and rituals and practices and all that stuff, it gives them access to do stuff, to unleash supernatural power and influence into our world. It didn't happen. And so God literally on this moment, in this massive battle, he flexes and he's like, nope, not today. And he shuts it down.